Great Wall Motor Tank 300 needs healthy competition on the market. And before you tell me, of course there is competition on the market for Tank 300, Dmitry, think about it. There isn't, at least not in Australia, at least not at the tail end of December 2023, because anything else that's remotely as good, remotely as off-roady as Tank 300 costs a lot more, usually has more polished electronics, and has a much is in a different weight category, so to speak, if we're using a boxing analogy. Today I'm showing you BAIC BJ40 positioned against Tank 300 on an unsealed road somewhere in Russia. I am translating a video from a Russian channel that I'm very grateful to, and our host here is also called Ilya, except he's not from Klubny Service, it's a different Ilya. He will tell us a lot more about on-road experience and off-road experience in BAIC BJ40 compared to Tank 300. I think, if nothing else, even if Australia never sees BAIC BJ40, which I hope that we will, because Tank needs healthy competition and we need more choice as consumers, on the market ultimately. If nothing else, it's just going to be fun for you to see what else is out there and what starts penetrating markets such as Russian market right now, which is very fairly compared against Tank 300. Keep watching, I'm sure you will enjoy it. If you do, give me a like in the process, don't forget about that. So let's start with a little bit of history first, because it's important in this case. GWM Tank 300 is being on the Chinese market since 2020, and in Russia specifically it's been released in March 2023, so relatively new comer to the market. A BAIC BJ40 is in China, believe it or not, for the past 10 years already, since 2013, and in Russia it appeared in August 2023, so even newer than Tank. Well, I was actually amazed to find out that BJ stands for Beijing Jeep, no less than that. It's a legit joint venture between BAIC and American Motors, and it has been established in 1984. So there is quite a bit of legs under this whole establishment and under these brands, in case you're wondering. Why am I comparing it to boxing categories? Is because both cars are a fair comparison to each other. They are very close sizing-wise. Some systems-wise, such as part-time 4x4, solid rear axle, and independent front suspension. Very, very similar weight category, with the difference being like 100 kilos, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Very, very similar 2.0-liter petrol engines that are pumping out around 220 horsepower and generating about 380 Newton meters of torque. They also have identical 8-speed automatic transmission by ZF, and transfer cases are in both cases are made by Borg Warner. Pricing, in case you're interested, of course Australia and other countries are going to be different, but just as a point of comparison, in Russia in December 2023, both vehicles cost around 70,000 Australian dollars and around 47,000 American dollars respectively. So now, how are they really different? And that is kind of just, again, early impressions. So Beijing Automotive Group vehicle is very, very, very Jeep Wrangler-like. I know that in the past I have compared Tank 300 to Jeep, but in this case we have literal replica of Jeep Wrangler. There is a removable roof, there is a roll cage, and all of the other kind of things that we'll keep talking about in this video. This is the most prominent feature and the difference from Tank 300, because Tank 300 is a little bit more of an on-road vehicle in terms of its construction, and the BAIC here, in this case BJ40, is a bit off-roady that Jeep Wrangler is intended to be. Sitting in BAIC's driver's seat, Ilya, our host here, says that it's very ascetic, utilitarian, very minimalist, and only the basics you need, nothing excessive whatsoever. Instruments panel, the front instruments panel, the main ones, is better according to Ilya, and I agree with him. Speedometer is front and center rather than all that unnecessary secondary, arguably rubbish that Great Wall Motor put front and center of the driver in Tank 300 and Haval vehicles as well. What's up with that? This case of BAIC having, the main instrument that is staring you right in the face and everything is visible front and center, that's the only way to go, and I really, really like that too, from what's shown to us anyway. Infotainment isn't being explored here properly or properly reviewed, but Just from what is in the frame here for us to see, it reminds me vaguely of a very basic MG ZST or MG HS infotainment of 2021 versions that we've had, and we still have in the family one of those cars. Our host here says that the rear view mirror is actually a camera. It's not a real actual mirror, and apparently it actually gets quite misty, at least in those weather conditions that they're testing the cars in, and it kinda is almost a bit hard to see sometimes. So that's not particularly good news for BAIC here. Sitting at the back of BAIC, it's almost funny, I kind of skipped through this original video, but to summarize, they tried to squeeze in 3 people, including one rather sizable individual there. And the vehicle is clearly, so one good thing is suspension. It's not dipping too much. They even used a ruler to measure it at one point here in the video. It's not dipping too much, even carrying quite a lot of like human weight in the back seat. That is a good thing, yeah? But the sizing of it in terms of a comfort of a ride, it's easy to assume that it's not going to be comfortable, and you probably should not put more than 2 people there at the back if you really are planning to somehow come into possession of BAIC BJ40 and drive around. The boot in BAIC is quite small, where a lot of space is taken up by the reinforcement, so the roll cage, same as I honestly remember having in my good old actual true Jeep Wrangler. Ilya says that if someone wanted to fit in and camp in the car properly, which I wouldn't camp in this kind of vehicle anyway, he would remove the rear row of seats completely, saving a lot of actual physical space and carry weight, because those appear to be quite heavy. Now, very quickly about Tank 300. Why quickly? Because we've spoken about it enough, but here it just confirms our earlier knowledge that it is a much nicer, richer, newer, and overall fancier experience and the vehicle in general. It's clearly a lot more modern design of an off-roader, if we keep comparing here to BAIC BJ40. Steering wheel is fully adjustable in every imaginable way. The driver's position is very comfortable to get and sit in that seat, adjustable also in multiple ways. It's much more comfortable, other than already mentioned inferior looking design of the main instruments cluster. I completely agree here. It's not just the host here trying to pick at something. I actually truly believe that that is how it is. Now to the fun part, my friends, driving along a very unsealed and rather beaten up road at speed in both vehicles. They start with Tank 300. Ilya is testing and ultimately focusing here on how the vehicle is controlled on that kind of road, especially at speed, and the suspension. How is the suspension absorbing, if at all, any of those bumps and dips? And he straight away comments that Tank 300 actually handles all this rather beautifully. In the original video, I could hear very noticeable rattling coming through the microphone, feeling rather horrible for all the suspension modules that handled all of this, in all honesty, by the looks of it, like a real champion. And our host here is driving along that road at the speed of like around 70 to 80 kilometers an hour. Can you imagine that? Would you do that? I would never do that. And they've even sped up even faster in the process of recording of this. Ilya says that Tank 300 is very easy to control on a road like that. There is no need to try and catch it, as he refers to it. As it traverses those numerous bumps and holes on the road, the car is compensating and absorbing almost anything. Of course, it's a bit rattly, but you can't just not rattle at all on a road like that. We can clearly see here that the drive is relatively smooth given the speed and other conditions. Overall, he says that it's a great feeling from an off-roader on this crazy road, and it's also a stock vehicle, let's not forget. So it's not lifted, it's not anyhow suspension reinforced. These are standard wheels on this, all of that. He says that, you know, if he slows down to about 60 to 65 kilometers an hour on this road, it practically feels normal, which is an excellent result. Absolutely no worries whatsoever. Electronics such as traction control, ABS are not interfering in this process at all either, which is great to hear. Steering is very easy, and steering wheel isn't jumping side to side, kind of causing zero discomfort to the driver. Now let's go to our newcomer here into the view, BAIC BJ40.
Difference, he says, is felt almost immediately. Speed is lower at around 60. The car is not holding its straight trajectory by itself. It requires constant correction with the steering wheel. Rear wheels are veering, and you can feel that you need to compensate as a driver, and the whole structure is jumping around quite a bit. It is definitely not a Tank 300. When he takes off from static position, accelerating to about 40, he immediately feels that the engine and electronics are suppressing further acceleration. There are noises happening there which are really unsettling, at least in the original video from what I heard. It's kind of like just buzzing against you, yeah, not allowing the driver to gain speed further. The car isn't absorbing the bumps, but instead it just hops over them, as he describes it. You feel that the road is obviously horrible. Yes, it is the same road on the Tank and here, but here you feel everything, and everything is shaking, apparently. You also can't just look left and right, as he says. You really need to hold on for dear life and try to compensate and make sure that that steering wheel is not just gonna jump out of your hands, and focus very much so on the road in front, or you will be in the ditch before you know it. Sound insulation is also evidently inferior to Tank 300's level. You hear everything apparently on the road as well as being bounced around. So it's like a 1 + 1, definitely adds up to a more stressful, bumpy ride, quite literally. Now, they do turn off ABS here to make driving feel a bit better, with a lot less interference from those driver assist technologies, which don't always help, as we know, and it does improve the experience marginally. At least he can increase the speed, he can compensate better, nothing is interfering with it, but still it is nowhere near the comfort level of Tank 300. Now, moving on to a true off-road mud dipping as they drive through the forest. This particular model of BAIC BJ40 does not have locking differentials, while Tank 300 does. So they have deliberately, where you see in the frames ahead, where you see that Tank, I don't know, struggles a little bit, or you can see a little bit of wheels doing their thing, it looks with a lot more effort, simply because they have disabled one of the essential systems that are used for off-roading, because BAIC BJ40 simply doesn't have it. I'm just going to leave you for a couple of minutes here, to enjoy the actual footage of how these cars go through a variety of true muddy pits and off-road. And if you are impatient to hear the verdict, you can always jump and skip ahead to the next chapter in this video and in the timeline. So on to the verdict, my friends. They have spent the whole day from dusk till dawn, practically, or the other way, from dawn till dusk, driving around the forest and far away from where they actually are based, further than 100 kilometers they've driven to get to that forest. Our host here summarizes that Tank 300, without a doubt, is a lot more pleasant, comfortable experience and much softer on the road. BAIC BJ40 is more ascetic, minimalist, void of comfort, but solid, very solid nevertheless, especially if we consider its history. It's been on the market, including in China, for a lot longer than this Tank 300, and that has to count for something in terms of its longevity, in terms of its ability to continue selling, and continue gaining some kind of traction, that they even decided to start exporting it into Russia. I can tell you that even though it looks like Tank 300 is winning here, hands down, kind of generally, if you're looking to buy a car within the same price category, it still feels that it's a good addition to the market, and it's a very healthy competition to Tank, where some people who are more into hardcore off-roading, taking off the roof, feeling like they actually have a Jeep, they actually might get something a lot more from BAIC. Speaking further about the off-road performance, all in all, again here not interpreting but translating what the host is saying, he says it's actually comparable performance. Comparable performance. 2-liter both engines, no massive expectations. They've done exactly what the hosts, what the creators of this show, original video, have expected these cars to do, these vehicles to do. BAIC is slightly more pleasant on the instruments, and slightly less pleasant on steering, where Tank wins. So Tank, again, to reiterate, is more comfortable overall. But off-road and in stock version, both cars did very, very well. Systems like ABS clearly work differently, as we've reported kind of earlier, and work a tiny bit more invasively and obstructively on BAIC BJ40 than on Tank. But both vehicles are comparable, and I hope that you have enjoyed this little comparison. Even though this car is not in Australia just yet, I would love to hear from my South African friends if you have BAIC in South Africa, or if they're about to roll in. I have reached out to BAIC Australia, BAIC Global, to talk about their plans for Australia, and they were very, very friendly people. They've responded that they don't have immediate plans to share, but they took my number, which is going to be exciting if they ever come to our shows. I do firmly believe that even though, once again, it feels like Tank 300 is an all-round winner, I still think that having healthy competition on the market within the same price category from the same kind of originating country, I think it is very, very healthy for the market and for the other brands such as Japanese, Europeans, who are otherwise dominating this segment. And Tank 300 so far is the only real contestant for this kind of segment of vehicles coming from China. But now is your turn to let me know what you think. Talk to me in the comments down below. I look forward to hearing from you, and like this video so that more people can like it if you've enjoyed it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.